The Galactic Military Academy floated in the void like a chrome monument to over-engineering, with all gleaming surfaces and impossible angles that probably cost more than most star systems' annual budgets. For 3,000 years, it had been the premier institution for military excellence, where the galaxy's finest minds came to study the ancient art of warfare. And by ancient art, I mean spending decades memorizing the 17,000 approved battle formations that hadn't changed since the Crystalline Empire invented them. Commander Vex'tar crystalline form refracted the Academy's artificial lighting into prismatic rainbows as he glided through the main training hall. His species had perfected warfare through mathematical precision, every battle calculated to the fourth decimal place. He was particularly proud of his masterpiece, the Siege of Omega Station simulation. 50 years he'd been refining it, 50 years of watching the galaxy's best military minds throw themselves against its defenses like moths against a plasma shield. Vex'tar announced to the assembled cadets, his voice ringing like wind chimes in a hurricane, the ultimate test of strategic thinking. No cadet has ever successfully completed the Omega Station scenario. It has broken the spirits of Vorthan war princes, reduced crystalline generals to weeping fragments, and sent entire Hive-mind collectives into therapeutic meditation. That's when the humans walked in. Jake Morrison stomped through the entrance like he was personally offended by the door's existence. 2 meters of barely contained aggression stuffed into an academy uniform that somehow looked military and casual at the same time. His call sign was Tank, which wasn't creative but was definitely accurate. Luna Park followed quietly, a small woman who looked like she could disappear into shadows if she tried hard enough. While other cadets carried data tablets and tactical manuals, she had a single worn notebook and the kind of eyes that saw patterns everyone else missed. Rex Rodriguez brought up the rear, grinning like someone had just told him Christmas came early this year. His uniform pockets bulged with what were definitely not regulation items, and he had the unsettling habit of humming while examining structural weak points. Vex'tar's tone dropped several degrees, our Deathworlder exchange students. How quaint that Earth finally decided to participate in civilized warfare training. The assembled alien cadets rippled with barely contained amusement. Humans were famous throughout the galaxy for their chaotic approach to conflict resolution, their tendency to solve complex problems by hitting them harder, and their disturbing habit of treating deadly situations like entertainment. I've prepared a special learning experience for you, Vex'tar continued, practically humming with smugness. The Omega Station simulation. Don't worry when you fail spectacularly. It will be educational. Jake cracked his knuckles loudly enough to make several nearby Octarians flinch. Sounds fun. When do we start? It's tomorrow morning. I suggest you spend tonight studying the preliminary tactical assessments. The basic briefing documents are only 400 pages. Luna looked up from her notebook for the first time. Just 400? That's cute. The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. The next morning's briefing hall buzzed with excited chatter in 17 different languages, most of which sounded like musical instruments being tortured. The galaxy's finest military minds had gathered to watch the humans inevitably embarrass themselves, and the anticipation was thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. Captain Zeph Lon of the Octarian Royal Naval Academy occupied a corner of the room, his 8 arms constantly moving as he managed multiple data streams simultaneously. The Octarians had turned multitasking into an art form, their military strategies resembling intricate dances where every movement served 3 purposes. We have been developing our approach to the Omega Station scenario for 8 standard months, Zeph Lon announced to anyone within hearing range. Our 47-step assault protocol accounts for every possible defensive countermeasure. Each phase builds upon the previous, creating an inevitable victory cascade. A few tables over, the Hive-mind Collective representatives sat in perfect synchronization, their movements so coordinated they might have been reflections of each other. When one spoke, the others moved their lips silently, sharing thoughts at the speed of quantum entanglement. Individual thinking leads to chaos, their primary speaker intoned while the others nodded in perfect unison. Our collective consciousness allows for flawless coordination between 200 combat units. Every action is perfectly timed, Every movement serves the greater tactical purpose. The Vorthan War Cadets had arranged themselves in a rigid hierarchy based on their parents' military achievements, their scaled hides gleaming with ceremonial battle scars. Their species had been conquering star systems when most of the galaxy was still figuring out fire, and they never let anyone forget it. Honor demands patience, their pack leader growled, exposing teeth that could probably bite through hull plating. We have studied the ancient battle forms for decades. Victory comes to those who follow the proven paths. In the center of it all, the three humans sat looking remarkably relaxed for people about to attempt the impossible. Jake was leaning back in his chair like he was watching a movie. Luna was doodling something in her notebook that looked suspiciously like engineering schematics, and Rex was building a small tower out of sugar packets. So Jake said during a brief lull in the alien boasting, "Has anyone actually tried just asking the station to surrender?" The room fell silent. Several cadets looked physically pained by the question. "That's not how warfare works," Zephlon explained patiently, his 8 arms gesturing in what was probably a condescending pattern. "The simulation is designed to test tactical brilliance, strategic thinking, and military precision." "Right, but have you tried it?" "Why would we try something so obviously ineffective?" Jake shrugged. "Dunno. Seems like it would save time." The aliens exchanged glances that clearly communicated their shared opinion. These humans were going to be entertaining right up until they got themselves virtually killed. Luna looked up from her notebook. "What's the station's primary power source?" "Classified tactical information," Vex'tar replied smoothly. "You'll need to discover that during the simulation." "And the defensive AI's decision-making algorithm?" "Also classified." "Structural composition of the outer hull?" "Classified." Luna nodded thoughtfully and made another note. "Got it. Rex, are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Rex's grin widened as he carefully balanced another sugar packet on his tower. "Oh yeah, this is going to be awesome." The aliens weren't sure what to make of this exchange, but they were pretty sure it didn't represent serious military planning. Commander Vex'tar activated the holographic display with a flourish that would have been impressive if anyone had been paying attention instead of placing bets on how quickly the humans would surrender. The three-dimensional image of Omega Station materialized in the center of the briefing room, rotating slowly to display its impressive defenses. "Behold," Vex'tar announced, "the most impregnable fortress ever designed. Omega Station represents the pinnacle of defensive architecture, protected by overlapping shield grids, automated defense platforms, and an unlimited supply of reinforcements." The station looked like someone had taken a medieval castle and decided it needed more death rays. Massive towers bristled with weapon emplacements, energy barriers flickered between defensive positions, and swarms of fighter craft patrolled in precise formations. "The objective is simple," Vex'tar continued, his crystalline form practically glowing with satisfaction. "Capture the station while maintaining at least 90% survival rate among your forces. You have unlimited time, but previous attempts have lasted between 6 and 12 hours before ending in complete tactical failure." The alien cadets leaned forward, studying the display with the intensity of art critics examining a masterpiece. They saw elegant defensive layers, sophisticated countermeasures, and beautiful mathematical perfection in the station's design. The humans saw something else entirely. "Those shield generators," Jake pointed at seemingly random spots on the display. "They're running on overlapping frequency bands, right?" "That information is classified until you begin the simulation," Vex'tar replied. "And the defense platforms rotate in fixed patterns?" "Also classified." "What about the AI coordination protocols? Are they using standard crystalline logic matrices or something custom?" Vex'tar's light flickered with annoyance. "All tactical specifications will be revealed during combat. That is the point of the exercise." Luna raised her hand like she was in grade school. "Just to clarify, we're allowed to use any tactics we want, as long as we capture the station and keep casualties under 10%? "Correct." "Any tactics at all?" "Within the bounds of civilized warfare, yes." Rex stopped building his sugar packet tower long enough to ask, what exactly counts as civilized warfare? The question seemed to surprise Vex'tar. Well, obviously you cannot use weapons of mass destruction, biological warfare, temporal manipulation, or reality alteration devices. What about psychological warfare? I suppose that would be acceptable. Electronic warfare? Standard practice. Creative interpretation of physics? Vex'tar paused. What do you mean by that? Rex's grin could have powered a small starship. Oh, you'll see. The alien cadets exchanged worried glances. The humans weren't asking the right questions. They should have been inquiring about force deployment ratios, optimal siege formations, and supply line management. Instead, they seemed to be looking for loopholes in the rules themselves. I predict total failure within the first hour, announced the Vorthan pack leader with the confidence of someone whose species had been winning wars since before humans discovered agriculture. Generous, replied Zephlon, his 8 arms calculating probability matrices. I estimate 37 minutes before complete strategic collapse. The Hive-mind Collective spoke in unison. Chaos cannot defeat order. Individual thinking cannot overcome collective precision. Jake stretched like he was getting ready for a nap instead of a military simulation. Well, this should be interesting. When do we start? Immediately, Vex'tar announced, his tone suggesting he was looking forward to this more than was probably professional. Please take your positions at the command stations. As the humans walked toward their designated control panels, Luna whispered something to her teammates that made Rex laugh out loud and Jake crack his knuckles again. Whatever they were planning, it definitely wasn't in any of the Academy's tactical manuals. The simulation began at exactly 0800 standard time, and within 30 seconds, every alien observer was convinced they were watching a masterclass in how not to conduct military operations. Jake's approach to the problem was elegantly simple. He pointed his entire fleet directly at the station's most heavily defended section and hit the acceleration. No formation flying, no tactical maneuvering, no attempt at strategy whatsoever. Just a straight-line charge into the teeth of Omega Station's primary defense grid. What is he doing? Zephlon's 8 arms were practically tied in knots as he watched the human fleet barrel towards certain destruction. That's suicide. The overlapping fire zones will destroy his ships before they get within weapons range. Maybe that's the point, suggested one of the Vorthan cadets. Perhaps they're attempting some form of honor-death ritual? The Hive-mind Collective watched in collective horror as Jake's ships flew directly into the station's kill zone, but apparently ignoring every principle of tactical warfare ever developed. This is chaos, they whispered in unison. This is madness. Meanwhile, it's below. Luna had somehow gained access to the station's secondary systems and was doing things to the defensive grid that made Vex'tar's crystalline structure actually crack with stress. Her fingers danced across her control panel like she was playing a musical instrument, and with each keystroke, something else went wrong with Omega Station's carefully calibrated defenses. How is she accessing those systems? Vex'tar demanded, his prismatic form flashing through the entire visible spectrum. The encryption protocols are military grade. It should take hours to break even the most basic security layers. Luna glanced up from her console long enough to flash a quick smile. Oh, I'm not breaking the encryption. I'm just asking the systems really nicely to do what I want. They're surprisingly cooperative once you speak their language. On her screen, critical defense systems were going offline one by one, but not in any pattern that made tactical sense. She was shutting down shield generators while leaving weapon systems active, disabling communication arrays while maintaining life support, and somehow convincing the station's AI that several of its own defense platforms were actually enemy ships. Rex had taken the most bizarre approach of all. Instead of engaging in direct combat, he was using his ships to place what appeared to be random explosive devices in seemingly pointless locations around the station's exterior. Not on weapons emplacements or shield generators or any obvious strategic targets, but on structural supports that didn't seem to serve any important purpose. Those locations make no tactical sense, observed a crystalline tactical instructor, his form practically vibrating with confusion. He's wasting explosives on decorative architecture and redundant support struts. Maybe he doesn't understand the station's layout, suggested another observer charitably. Rex overheard this comment and laughed. Oh, I understand it perfectly. You guys built this thing like a house of cards. Very pretty, very stable, very predictable. But you know what happens when you remove exactly the right cards? He triggered one of his charges, and a small section of the station's outer hull simply disappeared in a controlled explosion. Nothing vital was damaged, no critical systems were affected, but somehow the entire defensive rotation pattern shifted slightly off axis. The three humans communicated through what sounded like a combination of technical jargon and complete nonsense. Tank, you're pulling aggro perfectly. Keep them focused on your DPs while I work on the back-end exploit. Copy that, Luna. Rex, how's your demolition setup coming? Almost ready for the cascade. Just need another 30 seconds to position the final charges. This is going to be epic. The alien observers had no idea what any of this meant, but it sounded disturbingly confident for people who were supposedly failing spectacularly. They're using some kind of coded communication, Zephlon realized. But the translation matrices can't parse their tactical terminology. Perhaps it's a primitive human war language, suggested the Vorthan pack leader. The Hive-mind Collective was less generous in their assessment. They speak in chaos because they think in chaos. There is no logic to translate. But Commander Vex'tar was beginning to suspect something else entirely. The humans weren't failing. They were succeeding in ways that shouldn't have been possible, using methods that violated every principle of proper military strategy. And somehow, impossibly, it was working. At exactly 19 minutes and 37 seconds into the simulation, everything changed. Jake's seemingly suicidal frontal assault suddenly revealed its true purpose. His ships hadn't been charging blindly into the defense grid. They had been drawing the station's fire into precise patterns, creating blind spots in the overlapping coverage zones. Every shot the station fired was exactly where Jake wanted it, and his fleet danced between the laser bursts like they were performing choreography. He's not attacking randomly, Zephlon whispered, his 8 arms finally still for the first time in years. He's hurting their fire patterns, making them shoot exactly where he wants them to shoot. Luna's malfunctions weren't random system failures at all. She had been systematically dismantling the station's ability to coordinate its defenses, turning the AI's own decision-making algorithms against itself. The station's weapons were still functional, but they couldn't communicate with each other, couldn't share targeting data, couldn't adapt to changing conditions. She's not hacking the systems, Vex'tar realized with growing horror. She's convincing them to hack themselves. The AI thinks it's optimizing its performance while actually creating cascade failures in its own processing matrices. And Rex's explosives, placed in those seemingly pointless locations, had created a chain reaction that was turning the station's own structure into a weapon against itself. As support struts failed in carefully calculated sequence, the station's rotation began to wobble, throwing off its defensive alignment and creating resonance frequencies that interfered with its own shield generators. The explosions aren't meant to destroy anything, gasped a crystalline engineer who had been following Rex's demolition work. They're creating harmonic distortions in the station's structural integrity. He's using physics to make the station destroy itself. At 19 minutes and 45 seconds, Luna's voice cut through the chaos with casual confidence. Okay, guys, I've got root access to their central AI. Rex, trigger the cascade. Tank, prepare for the surrender broadcast. Surrender broadcast? Vex'tar's voice cracked like breaking crystal. What surrender broadcast? Rex's final charges detonated in perfect sequence, and the station's defensive systems began shutting down one by one as harmonic resonance shook apart their mounting systems. The shields flickered and died, the weapons fell silent, and the swarms of defense fighters found themselves locked out of their own navigation systems. At exactly 19 minutes and 47 seconds, Omega Station's communication system activated and broadcast a message that had never been programmed into its responses. This is Omega Station Control. We surrender. Please don't hurt us anymore. The simulation froze. Status displays showed complete mission success. Omega Station captured. 97% survival rate achieved. Total time elapsed less than 20 minutes. The briefing room was absolutely silent except for the sound of Rex humming what might have been a victory song. That's impossible, Vex'tar whispered, his crystalline form dim with shock. The simulation doesn't have a surrender protocol. I never programmed a surrender option. Luna looked up from her console with the expression of someone who had just solved a particularly interesting puzzle. I know, I added it. The AI seemed lonely, so I gave it some new dialogue options. Turns out it really didn't want to fight anymore once it realized how much more fun cooperation could be. Jake leaned back in his chair like he'd just finished a particularly satisfying meal. Good game, everyone. Same time tomorrow? The alien cadets sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. 50 years of tactical theory had just been demolished by 3 humans who treated warfare like it was some kind of entertainment. The Academy's main conference room had seen many heated debates over the centuries, but nothing quite like the chaos that erupted in the hour following the humans' impossible victory. Commander Vex'tar was practically vibrating at frequencies that made nearby equipment malfunction, demanding an immediate investigation into what he was convinced had to be cheating on an unprecedented scale. Review the logs. Vex'tar's voice shattered 3 drinking vessels and made several cadets cover their audio receptors. Check every system. Examine every command input. No one defeats the Omega Station simulation in under 20 minutes without violating fundamental laws of physics. The Academy's technical staff worked frantically to analyze the simulation data, running diagnostic after diagnostic, looking for signs of tampering, system intrusion, or reality manipulation. What they found was somehow worse than cheating. Everything the humans had done was completely legitimate, utterly legal, and absolutely impossible according to every military manual ever written. The tactical analysis is unprecedented, reported the chief simulation technician, a Vorthan whose scales had turned pale with confusion. Every action they took violated standard military doctrine, but somehow the violations combined to create tactical advantages that our modeling systems can't explain. Captain Zephlon was experiencing what his species called cognitive overflow, all 8 arms moving in random patterns as his brain tried to process the implications. They ignored force multiplication principles, violated basic strategic positioning theory, and somehow achieved better results than our most sophisticated battle plans. It's like watching someone solve mathematical equations by singing at them. The Hive-mind Collective had gone completely silent, their perfect synchronization broken by the realization that individual chaos had somehow defeated collective order. Several members were quietly having existential crises, questioning whether their entire approach to existence might be fundamentally flawed. But the humans seemed completely unbothered by the uproar they had caused. Jake was reading what appeared to be an entertainment magazine, Luna was sketching new modifications to the Academy's defense systems, and Rex was building another sugar packet tower while humming the same tune he'd been humming during the simulation. Could you please explain your tactical methodology? Asked the Academy's Dean of Strategic Studies, ancient Crystalline whose form had been polished by centuries of military tradition. For educational purposes, of course. Jake looked up from his magazine. Oh, that's easy. We speedrun it. Nah. You what? Speedrun it. You know, like when you try to beat a game as fast as possible by exploiting the physics engine and finding unintended solutions to puzzles. Luna found the AI manipulation exploit. Rex discovered the structural damage cascade. And I handled the aggro management. Pretty standard stuff. Really? The aliens stared at him blankly. Luna closed her notebook and tried to explain. See, you all approached it like it was a real military situation with real consequences. But it's just a simulation, right? So we treated it like what it actually is, a very complicated video game with specific win conditions and exploitable mechanics. Video game? Vex'tar's form was now flashing colors that didn't exist in most species' visual spectrums. This is advanced military training. Warfare is not a game. Rex balanced the final sugar packet on his tower and grinned. Everything's a game if you know the rules. And the first rule of gaming is that the developers always leave exploits in the code. You just have to be creative enough to find them. The Academy officials looked like they were having collective nervous breakdowns. 3 humans had just shattered 50 years of military education by treating their most sophisticated training simulation like entertainment software. "This changes everything," whispered the Dean of Strategic Studies. "If their approach is reproducible, if other species can learn these methods, we'll need to completely redesign our entire curriculum." "Our what now?" Jake asked. "Your curriculum. Your educational program. We'll need to study your techniques, analyze your decision-making processes, and integrate your methodologies into standard military training." The 3 humans exchanged glances and started laughing. "You want to turn what we did into a curriculum?" Luna asked between giggles. "Good luck with that. What we did can't be taught because it's not really a method. It's more like a mindset." "What kind of mindset?" Rex's tower finally collapsed, sugar packets scattering across the table. "The mindset that says rules are just suggestions. Impossible is just another word for untested. And sometimes the best way to win is to change what winning means." As the Academy officials frantically began redesigning their entire approach to military education, the humans quietly packed up their things and prepared to leave. They had other simulations to break, other impossible scenarios to solve, and other centuries-old institutions to accidentally revolutionize. "Same time next week?" Jake asked as they headed for the door. "Absolutely," Luna replied. "I heard they've got an unbeatable space battle scenario that's been stumping cadets for 80 years. Rex grinned and started humming again. 80 years? That's definitely a new speedrun record waiting to happen. Behind them, the Galactic Military Establishment tried to figure out how 3 humans had just rewritten the rules of warfare by treating it like a video game. It was going to be a very long century for traditional military thinking.